Welcome to the webinar, AI and the Church, Possibilities and Pitfalls. I'm John Poitevin. I'm the founder and director of Great Catholic Parishes, and I could not be more excited about this topic. Over 500 of you have registered from around the world, so obviously there's a lot of interest and curiosity around this emerging technology. And there's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of fears. Some people are really excited about it. Some people are terrified. There's doom scenarios. But there's also a lot of opportunities, as we said, to utilize this in our daily life, in planning ministry and researching, and even in helping people grow in their faith. I used AI extensively to develop this webinar. The introductory video you saw prior to this starting all utilized AI images that were created virtually online. Those are not real people. The music was created by AI. And yes, this video that you're watching right now, this version of me is an artificial intelligence avatar. I'm not doing this right now. I'm speaking, it's my voice, but we actually could have created that through AI as well. So put on your seatbelt, get ready. Let's start the AI and the Church webinar. Well, there we go. I bet that a lot of that didn't fool most of you. You were watching the intro and you said, wow, that guy has 6 fingers, or that lady's holding 2 pens, or that face looks kind of strange, which is true. And the video of me, those of you that have watched me at all probably said, man, John's eyes are really creepy. What is going on? But here's the reality, and you'll hear me say it again and again. That's the worst it will ever be. That avatar video was created in about 15 minutes yesterday afternoon. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Brian Falcon at St. Simon and Jude in the Woodlands, Texas. He created that avatar video for me last minute. If he had spent a couple hours on it, I'm pretty certain you would have not known the difference. Which leads me to part 2, because Father Pat Garrett there at St. Simon and Jude uses AI a lot. He uses Magisterium. He used it in a staff retreat that we did and a parishioner retreat. He uses it in sermons. He uses it other AI applications of translation into Spanish and that sort of thing. So there will be a part 2 of this webinar that will be very much practical parish applications and how to from parish leaders that are utilizing this. So with that, I would love to introduce our panelists. As I said in the intro there, that I utilized AI a lot to create this webinar. And gentlemen, when I went to ChatGPT and I told them what I wanted to do and what my organization was and who my audience was, you guys came up in the top of the list. So as guests to have on this webinar. So thank you for joining. Matthew Harvey Sanders is the Chief Executive Officer of Longbeard. He's joining us from Cape Town, South Africa. He is the head of Longbeard, and their tagline is, "We are building Catholic AI." They're the creators of Magisterium AI, Vulgate AI, and the Christendom app. Magisterium AI is a specialized artificial intelligence tool designed to provide faithful, deep, and verifiable information on Catholic teaching, and it's the world's #1 answer engine for the Catholic Church. Father Kenny Ang is joining us from Jakarta, Indonesia. This is truly an international webinar. We have folks from over 13 countries joining us online as well. Father Kenny is a research professor in dogmatic theology at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. He earned his doctorate in sacred theology there and now teaches Trinitarian theology. He's also deeply interested in the impact of artificial intelligence on theological inquiry and religious education. Gentlemen, thank you. What time is it where you are right now? What day is it?
I think I'm a day ahead. So it's 12 a.m. right now, 00.
Wow. Thank you for staying up.
It's 7 p.m. I think we're still same day.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to get into our topic. Thank you both for being here. You are really the A-team in this, and I couldn't be more honored to have you on this webinar. I'll start with you, Matthew. You know, people throw around AI today with anything that's computerized. That's AI. This is AI. When we say artificial intelligence, what do we really mean?
Well, there's a bunch of ways to define artificial intelligence. I mean, I tend to think of it as kind of humanity's quest to replicate cognitions in machines. So basically the ability to think, learn, and know. So if a machine is attempting to think, learn, and know, it's probably artificial intelligence.
And when we say learning and knowing, I mean, and we think of these things as the I mean, kind of the difference between intelligence or knowledge and wisdom. Where does it draw the line as far as its capability in that sort of thing, the human aspect of knowing and learning?
Well, I'm definitely going to kick the philosophical answer to that question to Father Kenny. But from a technical perspective, you get to kind of think of, four hallmarks of intelligence. One would be the understanding of like having a world model. So understanding how the world works. That'd be like intuitive physics and things like that. Another would be like persistent memory. Another one would be the ability to reason. And the final one would probably be the ability to plan a sequence of actions. So when we think about like machines learning and knowing, that's essentially the boxes they're trying to tick. Now, I should say a machine that was capable of effectively ticking all those boxes would be the most advanced artificial intelligence on the planet, something we would probably call artificial general intelligence, if it was effectively able to do all those four things. And so what we're seeing today is we call artificial narrow intelligence. So the AIs are pretty good at reasoning with a small r. They have some limited capacities, in the planning, and they're getting memory, but they still don't have a complete world model, which inhibits them in some ways. And basically what it means is that these AIs are good in certain fields, but they're very brittle. So when you start moving them into other fields, they start to fall apart. So typically we think of artificial intelligence today are good at STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And some of those domains, they demonstrate, PhD level capability. But you start putting them into the arts and humanities, they're not quite there yet.
Father Kenny, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. So, well, I think most of the church's endeavor in this line has been also to try to distinguish between artificial intelligence and human intelligence, right? As Matthew alluded to. So how can we distinguish human intelligence from the artificial one? Well, it's not very easy, just to begin with. Now, I think one of the lines that the church has been trying to at least, walk on is just highlight how relational human intelligence is, right? So we have relationships with the people we know, the things we know, right? So the relationality, that's first. And the other thing that's also important to just bear in mind at this point is the embodied knowledge, right? So for human beings, our knowledge is always embodied. Now, I know this opens up to, robotics, right? Now, also the field that's kind of opening up, right, with the AGI robotics. Then can we replicate the embodied type of intelligence we have, right? Now, that's another topic. Probably Matthew can say a lot about that as well. But yeah, I think, relationality and also the empathy, right? The at least Antiquae Nova, the latest church's document on, big document on AI, talks a lot about the empathy, human empathy. We know that so many people now chat with AI, right? Seek companions in AI chatbots. Now, that's not really human empathy.
Yeah, it's learned, it's responding in the way that it's been taught to respond. Is it fair to say that AI can only know and do what we teach it to know and do in that aspect?
Right, I think so, at least at this point, right? Now, I know there's an effort to make the AI able or capable to learn by itself, right? I think at this point, we're at the level where the AI ingests the data that are already available.
We're getting close, though. What we're talking about here is something called fully autonomous recursive self-improvement. And that's kind of like the unlock, which would get us to kind of like run away to artificial general intelligence, and maybe one day artificial super intelligence. We're not there yet, but certainly they're making good progress in the industry. Whether you think that's a good thing or think it's something we could discuss. So I would say at this point, the systems, Demis Hassabis, who's the head of DeepMind, tends to think of the ability of like these machines to think in three different ways. You think interpolation, extrapolation, and then invention. So interpolation would be like, he uses the example. I like this example. Like if you asked an AI system to give you, an image of a cat, right? What it would do is it would look at all the images of cats it's trained on, and it could like, put together kind of a compilation of all those cats and produce you technically an original cat in the sense that this cat can't be seen as training data, but really all it did is just kind of crunch the numbers and produce kind of like a synthesis of a cat, right? And then you have extrapolation. Now, this is a little bit more impressive. If I don't know if some of you may have heard of when Google's AlphaGo beat the world's best Go player, which is this pretty advanced game that even humans can take years to master. An AI system that Google built beat the world champion. And at one point, the AI made this famous move called Move 37, which was a truly original move, meaning that nobody had seen it before. And that move, some would argue, was kind of key to AlphaGo winning that. And so that would be an example of extrapolation. It played itself many times over and over and over again, and it was able to kind of pause it and come up with original moves. And then you have invention. And this is what we haven't seen yet from AI, but this is what everyone's working towards right now, where AI can truly invent something new, something that's not in its training data. And I think this is something that over the next 2 years, you'll hear about it when it happens. But this is what the major AI labs like DeepMind and OpenAI are working on, and that would truly be a breakthrough, because that requires something well beyond what the current AI systems are capable of.
Yeah, and those kind of conversations put a lot of trepidation and, as I said in the intro, doom scenarios that people latch on to, people that are probably already paranoid about life, and this is just something to fuel that fire. We are going to talk about pitfalls and things to be concerned about later in the webinar, but I want to dial it back a little bit, and let's just talk practical and the possibilities for local, whether it be at a parish or at a diocese. What are some of the practical ways that parishes and faith leaders can use AI organizationally?
Well, there are just so many spheres where a parish can leverage AI, I think. First would be, I would say, content generation, right? So nowadays, content is very important. Now, to generate just ideas or, repurpose the sermon, for example, the Sunday homily, and break it down to key takeaways or some key principles people can just go home with, and design just with Canva some simple design you can post on social media, you can share on messaging apps. I think that's helpful, right? And messaging, personalized emails, drafting emails is nowadays so easy, much more easier with AI, and it's such a great help as well. And then just, I don't know, manage database. Now, there's privacy concern here as well. Of course, we have to think about that, but to start with, manage database, and by that you can plan so many things at a parish based on the data, right? Not just kind of guessing around and fumbling around. We should do this or do that, but based on the data of the parishioners, we can plan better the activities at a parish, the type of approach we want to have with parishioners, etc. Scheduling, volunteer coordination. I'm just throwing out examples here, right? We're not talking to priests yet, but the parish as an institution, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a solo entrepreneur, I utilize it every day for everything from drafting proposals to creating workshops to getting ideas for exercises. There was a staff conflict resolution workshop that I was putting together, and ChatGPT was able to pull together a strategy that had never crossed my mind that was very thoughtful, and it reduced a lot of the anxiety of the situation. And of course, it's drawing from a knowledge base out there that would take me hours and weeks and years probably to gain. So I see, especially parish leaders that are understaffed, this could be that resource that they don't have the time or the money to staff certain things. Matthew, what are some other ways that you see parish leaders using AI in really practical ways?
Well, I mean, there's obviously the day-to-day kind of administrative work of the parish, and certainly AI can be very helpful. And Father Kenny's and yourself, John, have kind of pointed to some examples there. And I think that on the spiritual side, there's room as well. I mean, speaking for Magisterium AI, a lot of the users we have would basically kind of be priests, who would be parish administrators, archdiocesan staff. And they're using Magisterium for a whole bunch of reasons, right? I mean, one could be if something is released from the Holy See, could be encyclical, but more often than not, it's just a general audience or something like that. And they're just looking to have some of the concepts in that audience kind of broken down for people. Maybe they're gonna preparing a catechetical lesson, right? So maybe they're doing RCIA. So AI can be very useful in distilling, more complex kind of theological documents. It's also very useful, and I think we have to appreciate that many of our priests are exceptionally busy, and some places have big priest shortages, and so there's a lot of demands on their time. And so that means that they don't have the time to individually spend much time with people who may be in the RCA program. They may have lots of questions, but they can show up for a lesson, they can teach it, and then they have to roll, right? So the nice thing about, I think, these AI products, like Magisterium AI, but there are many others, is that if people do have straight up catechetical questions and they're looking for a place, to take them, and frankly, they want to take their time, to really dive into the rabbit hole and go deep. The nice thing of these AI systems is they're capable of working with people for as long as they need to. I think in Catholic education, there's obviously a lot of opportunities there. There's things we're working on for learn mode for education. There's voice mode so people can talk, to talk to an AI and learn about the faith. I could go over a bunch more examples, but I think that's where I see the biggest lift is just helping our priests find the time they need for the sacramental work and those people who are most desperately in need.
Would you give us the overview of Magisterium, unpack that a little bit more about what it does and why it exists, and what are some ways that pastors are using that specific platform?
Well, maybe I'll just start with the why it exists. And I'll give it a short story. When ChatGPT dropped, we found out that Catholics were using it to ask it theological, philosophical, and moral questions. And, obviously it's a very impressive technology, but it had its downsides. It has this propensity, as I'm sure many of you are listening have heard, this propensity to hallucinate. It makes things up. When it generates an answer, it's not really transparent about what data it's using to generate those answers, right? And then that's mainly because most of that information is compressed inside of its parameters, and it doesn't even know necessarily what data it's using. And then if it's going to sources, it doesn't always have the prudence and wisdom to know what sources are the right ones to use. So these were just a couple problems. There are many others that we felt could be a problem because it could end up leading people astray. So we started a research project at the time, which was called Magisterium AI, to see how far we could go to mitigate these issues. And so essentially the big ones we're working on is can we eliminate hallucinations or reduce the probability of hallucinations? How far could we go with that? And could we ensure that everything the AI says is grounded in original source material, primary source material? And what we found is we could. And we realized that it was doing a better job than a lot of the conventional AIs. And eventually we released it publicly, initially so that we could get more people testing it in chanceries and things like that, and canon lawyers and theologians. And eventually it kind of went viral, and we had so much traffic, it actually took us down. And so we took that as a good sign that there's a demand for something like this. And so we kind of dropped the agency part of our business, which was focusing on building technology for people in the church, and just focused exclusively on this mission to build and scale Catholic AI. And to that end, we realized very quickly a large part of mitigating these issues of AI come down to the size of the knowledge base. So how much knowledge can you give the AI access to? How much can that knowledge be brought to bear on people's kind of day-to-day practical areas of life? And so that started us on a quest to try and digitize the patrimony of the church, or digitize everything the church has said. And so that became a very important secondary mission of ours, which is basically to digitize the patrimony of the church. And that's why we stood up the Alexandrian Digitization Hub in Rome to help digitize the pontifical libraries. It's why we work with a lot of academic institutions to get access to publications and things like that. And so as our knowledge base grows and their AI has access to more information, it's become more and more capable of adding value to people's lives. And I appreciate Pope Francis. He's on a couple occasions, he made an important point. I'm thinking one of his important addresses was his address to the G7, right? Shortly before he passed. That was a very important speech. He was invited to address the G7, and he chose to speak on AI, which was quite a bit shocking even to us who work in the industry. And one of the things that he said a little bit later was that AI is not neutral, and that's true in the sense that to date, AI is trained on human data, and that human data is not neutral. Obviously, it's full of all kinds of opinions, and so it's important to know that when you're using the system. And so, debiasing the system and ensuring that at least it's grounded insofar as you can ground is important. That being said, it's still a tool, and so as a tool like the printing press, I think it's important that the church figure out ways to constructively leverage it to serve the church's mission.
Father Kenny, how have you been utilizing AI, specifically Magisterium, in your work at the university?
Right. I use AI every day, as you do as well, as you said earlier. So I use different AI services, different AI programs for different purposes, right? Now, it's interesting when I want to work with text, right? No, I was going to say that you talk about how AI can generate anything groundbreaking or novel at this time. I think that's kind of true because in research, Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's capable of generating something novel, right, or groundbreaking, or making very profound connections between researches or journals, right, articles. Is not there yet. So normally I use AI to work on something I have generated myself, right? So either it's a research, a piece of, probably I normally do the research, the hard research first, right? So I have a very rough draft, and I tell the AI, help me just tidy up this draft so I can think better, right? So I think the point is also not to relegate thinking to AI, right? So that's normally how I use Gemini, right? I kind of more inclined to Gemini, but we can also use ChatGPT and other services all the same. But then if I want to ask something that the Magisterium has said, I always go to Magisterium AI, because when you go to ChatGPT or Gemini, I think, well, you get a rough idea of what the Magisterium could have said, right? But I like having the sources, and I like consulting the sources myself and see what the context in which, Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Francis has said something that's quoted in the answer of the AI. So that's normally how I use Magisterium AI. I've also used it to generate outline. I want to give a talk to a certain group of people, right? I want to give a talk to, moms, right? Moms. So it's like 40, 50s in those age. So moms, and it has to be 30 minutes, right? With a language that's suitable to their age, with the outline they could understand, and I define the topic I'm going to cover, right? So it's very helpful in that as well. So outline, right? Definition, comparison, right? So that's normally how I use different AI services.
Matthew mentioned Pope Francis statements, and I've got a question here from Sean O'Callahan. Pope Leo stated shortly after his election that one of his priorities related to his choice of name following the model of Pope Leo XIII and the Industrial Revolution would be the challenges of the AI revolution. So far, he doesn't seem to have said a lot about it, but do you think it's possible that his first encyclical might address AI, or any other thoughts that you have towards his involvement in speaking about AI?
That's the rumor, and I think there's a good chance that he would do that. I think also he's the first Augustinian pope we've had in quite some time. And I know many of us are kind of excited to hear kind of his Augustinian take on I think contemporary society. But I think that there may be a way for him to kind of tick both those boxes. So yes, I think it probably will, or at least I would think he would at least reflect on AI to some extent in the first encyclical. I think the tricky part is he's got a lot of advisors, right? And man, I get contacted, it feels like every day, with someone who feels they have to get to the Pope because there's something they have to say to him about AI that they're worried that other people aren't telling them, and they have to get this message to him. So I expect that one of the reasons why we haven't heard too much is that there's a lot of research, a lot of consultation that has to happen there. I think at this point he probably has a fairly clear insight on where he feels the encyclical needs to go. I think the difficult part is just making sure that if you're going to be reflecting particularly on the science, that you get it right, and that takes a lot of widespread consultation. One of the reasons I brought up the Augustinian part of this, though, is I do think. Let me put it this way: the thing that I worry about the most in the AI and robotics age is not AI in robotics. What I worry about is how humanity will react to AI in robotics, and I worry about how the technology will affect people existentially. And I could go on and on about this existential cliff that I think we're heading towards. But I do really think that more than anything else, what humanity needs is to have a clear sense for what we're all paddling towards. I mean, what does the city of God, as Augustine wrote, look like today? What does it look like in the AI and robotics age? I think it's important that we get clear about that, so that we can ensure that the technology is being directed towards the right problems, and it's helping to basically, build up a civilization intended to help us to flourish, and not to do something like just maximize GDP. And so I think that there's a lot for him to say in that particular area, and I feel pretty confident he'll share some pretty profound insights.
Well, I want to get to the existential cliff in just a few more steps. But before we do, Father Kinney, what are your thoughts on Pope Leo and his involvement in AI in the future?
Yeah, so I have a blog post written on this, and I can share it later. right? So actually, as Matthew has suggested, he hasn't said a lot. So in this blog post, I have listed all his interventions on AI. He has 7 till this point of time. No, he hasn't said a lot. So he has made allusions to AI, but not very substantially, right? Now, we do have though some of the probably directions he's going to take toward concerning the AI, right? For example, he calls it a new industrial revolution, as we know. So we know the industrial revolution and how Pope Leo XIII responded with Rerum Novarum and all that, right? Respecting the workers' dignity, workers' wage as well, and how we should treat them, etc. Now, we can kind of guess where Pope Leo XIV is going to go from that, right? So dignity, justice, labor, right? So, and that's kind of the first point we can have in mind. And the second one would be this global call to action, right? So responsibility, which Pope Francis has also underlined. Now, AI is not only the responsibility of developers or a certain group of people. We should not relegate that to a select people, right? But this is everybody's responsibility, especially the governments, right? Making the policy to kind of guardrail, but also to kind of, accompany the development of AI. And then the third point, which might be connected to the fourth, I will mention right now, is just protecting the human being. Right. The first one is I think the Pope is thinking a lot about the youth. There are just so many cases we can mention about this, right? And then humanity, right? So his concern is very anthropological, just understanding who the human being is and what's the calling of the human being. And in this light, we should treat AI. We should use AI in the light of the dignity of the human being. Right?
That's great. I want to give a shout out in that direction to Brian Honziger at St. Paul Inside the Walls in New Jersey. Brian is a friend of mine. We've done a lot of work together. And Brian has a podcast called the Paul Street Journal, which I've put a link to in the chat, along with a link to Father Kinney's blog. A year ago, they did a podcast on Rerum Novarum, and that was really my insight into Pope Leo XIII. And I would say during the conclave, I believe, Brian posted on Facebook, "We need another Pope Leo," and how wild and prophetic that would be who we have. So, Brian, I hope you're watching. I know you care about this topic, and I hope you guys will check out that podcast, because understanding Pope Leo XIII, I think, will give you a lot of insight into Pope Leo XIV. Okay, we're just to the edge of that existential cliff, I promise you. Before we started recording, Matthew, you mentioned something about robotics that you guys have been working on. Father Kinney, you're going to check it out the next time you're in Rome, that are going through encyclicals and documents, and explain what that project is. Well, when I open, I can mention that building and scaling Catholic AI is our primary mission. Our secondary mission is to digitize the patrimony of the church. And that is because we got into that because it needs to be done, but also because we can't really build AI without getting access to more data. So the question is, how do we get access to good quality Catholic data? And the answer, as far as we could see it, was to get into the libraries and to digitize all that great Catholic and philosophical and theological insight that hasn't been digitized or read in some cases hundreds of years. But to do that, there's a bunch of challenges, right? I mean, so one is there's the whole physical ingestion, there's the whole scanning process, and that technology hasn't really advanced as much as one would expect. So we did a search around the world to see who makes the most advanced robotic scanners in the world, and we found a company in Germany that did it, and then we decided to buy basically a little fleet of them, and we set up something in Rome called the Alexandria Digitization Hub in collaboration with the Pontifical Gregorian University, and the idea was to get these robots all in one place, and then basically any of the pontifical universities that had holdings they wanted to digitize, or that we identified or would be important to digitize, we invite them to bring them to the hub, and we digitize them. And we'd use these robot scanners. It's pretty cool. Like the robot turns the page, scans, turns the page, scans, and that's why we call them robotic scanners. Essentially, it's trying to remove the human from the loop as much as possible in a good way. Humans are still, of course, overseeing the process, but getting the robots to do a lot of the kind of more tedious work.
And then the other challenge in this process says, okay, so now we got the book scanned. Now, how do we get all the information out reliably? And so there's a technology called OCR, optical character recognition, which has been around for many, many years, but it tended not to be very reliable, right? And I'm sure many of us have had the experience of like copying from PDF and pasting it into a document, like, ugh, and then having to clean it all up. So we realized that we could use AI to extract the information from these texts in any language, and then to basically just structure the data, label it, and then convert it to something called vector embeddings. And what's cool about this process of converting the text to vector embeddings is it makes it language agnostic. And what this means is that anybody can ask a question in their native language, and that question is converted into what we call a vector. And that vector is then used to search a vector database of other vectors. And the AI then extracts all the insights which are relevant to answering your query. And then an AI basically takes those insights, reviews them, and then generates an answer. And this is how Magisterium AI works. And what's incredible about that is I can ask a question in any language, and I can derive insights from books that are in Greek, ancient Slavonic. It doesn't really matter. And so we saw a really powerful opportunity to democratize access to the patrimony of the church through artificial intelligence. So we built a platform called Vulgate in order to kind of serve that mission.
Well, when you mention robots doing this, I picture C3PO walking through a library somewhere and taking books off the shelf and scanning them. And I know that's not what it looks like, but I'm going to imagine that's what it looks like, because I think that would be amazing.
One day, John, one day.
One day? I hope. No, or I don't. That again, that kind of takes us to that scary stage. Let's go there. Let's go to the things that we should be concerned about. I know there's personal concerns, there's societal concerns. I even read recently about environmental concerns, about the amount of energy that AI uses. What are the things that are realistic that we should be concerned about?
Well, I'm going to speak first from my point of view as an educator. In the academia, there's a great concern. I can say that, right? Because there's a concern that students will now relegate thinking. Well, probably not only students, but also professors. Well, that more and more people will relegate thinking to AI. That's a big concern. And there's also a concern of how we should educate now. And this spans all levels of education. I've talked to, high school teachers, middle school teachers, primary school teachers, and then university educators. So how should we assign tasks to our students that help them learn and not have them cheat with AI? So I think so much of the focus right now is how can we design a system, a syllabus, or whatever you call it, right? A syllabus that will assess them in a very accurate manner, and not allowing them to cheat with AI, right? That's a big. I think that's a big thing, right? In the educational world, we're thinking a lot about this. I've been reading a lot because I have to give a talk to my faculty there at the Santa Croce in Rome, right? To my colleagues. How can we face the AI revolution within education? So I think that's one concern, right? Relegating us to AI. Another concern is, I probably can call it anthropomorphizing AI, right? So I just had a dinner with my friend a couple of days ago and found out that she chats with AI chatbot as well. And to talk with her boyfriend, right? So what should I say to him? And then she asked AI chatbot, now you have a new companion, right? New person to talk to. Now, will that be helpful? That's my question. Because we have had cases of suicides as well, right? Related to AI. Yeah, so that's another concern I have, right? I would be concerned with that. So would that help us relate better with others? Right? Would that help me be a better person? Right? So the first one was education. Does this help me think better? Right? Because writing itself, we think that AI is our assistant, our secretary, right? That helps us write. But there are concerns nowadays that people can't write in complete sentences anymore. I saw, I think it's a YouTube interview of a high school teacher and somewhere in the States. And she says that my students just think that it's okay for them to just write, words. I don't know, right? Not even complete sentences, because they think, oh, later AI will complete my sentences, right? Why would I learn to write neatly, right? But sometimes in writing, there's thinking process, right? So writing helps me. So at least personally, I try to first write a draft without using any help from the AI because it helps me think. Writing is also thinking, right? Kind of organizing our ideas and just write slowly and you don't have any AI help. I think that helps. So that'd be my two biggest concerns so far.
Yeah, pen, and I mean we lost the art of writing with pen and paper a long time ago, and it does somehow neurologically connect with doing something physical like that while we're thinking and writing. What are some bigger concerns on your end, Matthew, that you see?
There's a lot. Probably the biggest one would be that the transition to the AI and robotics age will not be managed well. That's probably the one I worry about the most, which is downstream from not being clear about what kind of civilization we should be trying to build, right? I mean, that would be my number one concern. Cardinal Collins, and I say this all the time, but used to say to me, former Archbishop of Toronto, if you know where you're going, you're more likely to get there. And I think that's a big problem right now. So I think for the most of us, would have a real hard time describing what kind of future we're trying to build and why it's better than where we're at now, and how people will live. And so I think that's important to nail that down. But I think that the Pope is going to help us with that, remind us about who we are, who we're meant to be as human beings, what kind of world we're supposed to be trying to build. Trying to bring the kingdom of heaven. Build the kingdom of heaven here on earth. So I think that problem will be addressed. At least from the Catholic side of things. But the transition to the AI and robotics stage, the technology is moving so fast that the typical we have about adapting these technologies, kind of like the Industrial Revolution. Although that was a very rapid change, and I think many could convincingly argue the transition was not smooth at all, and there was a lot of collateral damage. That being said, it still took place over the course of many years. And so thank God for prophetic popes and things like that who gave us kind of fair warning, and we were able to kind of, hammer out most of the bigger issues. But we've never seen a transition like this before. It's moving so fast, it's bewildering, and just when you think that you're understanding what the implications might be in the next year or two, right? A new breakthrough comes in, you have to completely reevaluate your analysis. And so my concern is that I think in the next 4 or 5 years, when robotics manufacturing starts to really take shape in combination with super intelligent AI systems, that we could see 80% of work beyond the way out. Now, it's not to say that 80% will be gone in 4 to 5 years, but we're going to be on that path, and that's going to pose a lot of really profound questions. I mean, if 80% of people are not going to have jobs, because essentially our capitalist economy is going to be, in the competitive nature of our capitalist economy, is going to force these companies to continue to automate with people's jobs. Where's that going to lead people? Now, I generally do think, and I agree with people like Elon Musk, that there'll probably be so much prosperity created by these technologies that maybe people don't have to worry about their Maslow needs, things like shelter and food. Obviously, it would be in everyone's interest to ensure that their kids are fed, right? But existentially, I worry that a lot of people are just not going to know what the heck's life supposed to be about now that I don't have to punch in somewhere, right? I mean, everything I've done has been about to go to university so I can get a piece of paper, so I can get a job, so I can put my kids, through university. Yeah. And pay my mortgage, and now that's not a thing anymore. So what do I do with all this time? And I think figuring out what to do with that time is going to be one of the most difficult and challenging things that society's going to have to address in the next few years.
But also a great opportunity for the church to speak to something meaningful in people's lives. I think this is a very weak comparison, but I think to understand the necessity of work and purpose in the human life. Look at so many people who retire and suddenly have this crisis of who am I and where do I find my purpose in life? And then they find all these other things that keep them probably more busy than they were when they had a job, because it is just innate within us that God created us to work the land and to transform things. And that is to me, that is a true, beyond all the doom scenarios, people finding purpose. And maybe we will pivot and they will find it, and they'll be able to even invest their time in more meaningful things than doing menial tasks. That would be amazing. I guess in closing here, with all these fears and perceptions that people have, a lot of people's reaction is just run away from it, demonize it, avoid it, don't touch it. And I think people did that early on in the internet, right? There's only bad stuff on the internet. Why would our parish have a website? Because it's just bad stuff out there. Tell us, what will be the cost if we divest from AI personally and as parishes?
First of all, I'd say that attitude of saying that, oh, this is evil and we should avoid it, I don't think that's very Catholic. I think I'm being very blunt here, but I don't think that's very Catholic, because the Catholic attitude has been seeing this as a tool, right? If we want to follow the recent pontiffs, seeing this as a tool. And also historically, if we see all history, I mean, books themselves were a new thing at some point of time, right? There weren't books, right? Papers, sheets of paper codified into one book. I mean, that's a new technology, let's say. So I think Catholic attitude has always been embracing technology and using it for the good. Right? So, yeah. Now, what's the consequence of probably a primary consequence of Catholics not jumping into this new technology is having others do it. I think you let other people do it, and they'll do it with other criteria. So where are we Catholics as salt, right? Salt in the earth. Where are we as yeast in this, this dough of bread, right? Aren't we gonna put in, right? Chip in, and then just sow the good seeds of the gospel in this area as well, in AI, where we can actually do so many goods. We see Magisterium AI, etc. If our attitude is already doomsday or evil, just let it be. I remember when I was still on Instagram, I saw a reel, right, this short video of a person saying to a large group of crowd, and don't use Instagram, it's evil, right? And then one of the comments, or one of the things that appeared after that is that, dude, it's all algorithm, right? I mean, so if you keep seeing bad things on Instagram, it's because you see bad things all the time, and the algorithm keeps suggesting you those bad things, right? I mean, different types of bad things you can think of on the internet, right? It's the algorithm. It's actually how you use it. I think it's very illustrative of how we should treat AI.
Matthew, you are doing exactly what Father Kenny said. You are utilizing it for good, creating a space for it to impact people's lives spiritually, to all that you're doing in digitizing of documents and resources that people have not had access to for centuries. When we look outside of Magisterium and people are utilizing different AI out there, whether it be ChatGPT or Meta or whatever, what are some good guidelines for being cautious in utilizing those resources for people?
Well, I think that number one would be, remember Pope Francis's wisdom, right? That the AI is not neutral. These AI systems are built by companies, and those companies have pretty transparent objectives, right? They're trying to make money. And so you can read into that as much as you'd like, but you have to be wary. That's one. The second thing is just remember that these AIs have safety rails built into them, and those safety rails, the ethics of the AI, are created by people at these companies for the most part, right? So when you're deciding what AI system you want to use, don't ignore the company that's making it. Don't just pay attention to the benchmarks and the capabilities. Look at the company. Look at what the company stands for, the way that they go about involving themselves in the world, right? And what issues that they choose to emphasize and focus on. And I would take that into consideration. At this point, all the major AI labs are making pretty comparable AI, right? So Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, they're all pretty comparable. You have Elon Musk, Grok, all pretty comparable in capabilities. But those companies certainly have different reputations and are impacting the world in different ways. So I think that's important for us. Just as like it's important for Catholics to vote, right? It's in the same way it's important for us Catholics to kind of vote for the AI that we think is most aligned, and that will hopefully incentivize the other companies to follow suit. So that'd be my first piece of advice. And my second one would be, in the very least, recognize that it's the most powerful technology that's ever been invented. And it's going to change the world, unlike any technology in the history of humanity. You're going to start to see AI and robotics in absolutely everything. Ignoring it comes with a great cost. And the cost that I worry about the most is the souls that we're going to lose. When some people don't have a job and they have time on their hands, they're not necessarily going to stumble across the Catholic faith, right? They're going to stumble across gaming, right? Or pornography or something. And they're going to be lost in these AI worlds where it's seemingly endless content, which leads them down a dark path. And that's where that existential cliff comes in. If when they get to that cliff, because essentially nothing will satisfy, right? Because we know it won't ultimately. When they get to that cliff and they're wondering, what's the point of living? If the church is there to extend its hand to them, right before they're about to jump, if they don't look back and say, have I tried everything? Is there anything else I can try? And if we're not there with our hand, we're going to lose them. And that's going to be on all of us. And so I think we have to figure out as best we can how we can leverage these technologies to make sure that we're there in those crucial moments and can help people walk back from that cliff and hopefully give them a reason to live.
You know, when people demonize these organizations, because as you said, they are out to make a profit, I think they forget sometimes that there are also decent humans that work at these organizations. And I know ChatGPT came along and partnered with you on some things early on. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when we went down with all that traffic at the time, ChatGPT was still pretty new, and so only enterprise companies had like pretty high bandwidth usage on the API, and Sam Altman himself actually directly intervened to put us back in business. Now, Sam is a pretty controversial guy at this point, but that always amazed me that he did that. He took the time to say, you know what, this is cool. That's a quote. This this is cool, and he stepped in and he put us back in business. So I think it's important. Like these people, sometimes we hear a lot about them and some of the things they've said or some of the conflicts they're having, and we tend to think of them as just being egoists who are only concerned with growing their company, right, and pushing up their evaluation. But as you say, John, I think it is important to remember these are complicated people. Right. And many of those heads of AI labs, like Denise Hassabis, the head of DeepMind, which is Google's AI division, has kids. And he cares deeply about the world. His kids are going to grow up in, and he wants to influence it as best as he can. And people like him are working really hard to use AI to solve disease. So, I think it's important not to demonize these people, to recognize these are people that are all on a journey. And what we have to do as much as we can is extend our hand and offer to work with them to help build this technology, and hopefully in a way that's aligned with our faith.
Yeah, I think we live in a world where people so much demonize others that don't align completely with them and their ideas, and fail to realize these are humans, like you said, that have families and values and complex lives, and probably have some sort of faith history in their background, probably have people around them that they know that are people of faith, and you can be a part of that journey for them. As people are wondering what they can do today, I would just encourage you, jump on, try some things out, just explore it. Go to Magisterium, go to the Vulgate, go to even ChatGPT. Try to ask it questions on how to help you do something. Anything from cooking dinner, and hey, here's my budget, here's what we like to eat, create a grocery list for me. Just get out there and try it and experience it and see what it's about. And I think that many of you will find, oh, there are a lot of things I could utilize this for to help me in my ministry. And as I said, next month, we're going to talk very specifically with people who are doing that. So to wrap up today, thank you both so much. Father Kenny, staying up past midnight in Jakarta, and Matthew in South Africa. Father Kenny, I'd love to give you a closing just as someone who is forming spiritual leaders and really looking at this from a holistic perspective. Would you just give an encouragement to those watching in their ministry out there as they're wrestling with this idea?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, John, for organizing this, and a great time with you, Matthew, here. And yeah, thank you for joining, all of you. And thanks for your work, for your ministry, different parishes at different levels. Probably some of you maybe are priests as well. I thank you for your work, and God bless you. And in this very difficult and complex time, I think it's important to just go back to the basics and know that we as humans, we are related to each other, right? This relatedness is very important in this technological age. And we realized this after the pandemic, right? We still like getting together, right? And of course, this webinar is great, right? It connects us. But we still like, just organizing coffee after Mass, right? And those simple things that's very local and very... Right, it's just right there at the center of our faith as well, right? This, togetherness. And thank you. And again, as John pointed out, AI is a tool. Well, it's not neutral, but it's a tool that we can use for our peril or for our good as well. So give it a try. And probably one good question as well that we can pose to ourselves is, how can AI tools help me be better Christians, right? How can I use this to become better Christians, right? Probably for your Bible studies. For studying the Bible is very useful, AI. Sometimes there are just information, background information, geographical, archaeological, historical, whatever information you need to understand something. And you can try using AI or Magisterium AI, right? And see where that leads you. And of course, cross-checking those facts. And yeah, I think we can ask ourselves that question and we can gain a lot of benefits.
I think what you said there early on is so important. Nothing replaces human connection, especially in the faith journey. And I really would encourage you, use it for a lot of things. Use it for research, use it to make things more efficient, but don't use it to replace a human connection. A pastor was asking me, well, should we replace our receptionist with an AI bot? And I said, no, a human voice that says, how can I help you, is irreplaceable. And please make sure you're using people to do that. Thank you both. So glad you're with us. We could go on and on about this, but I'll encourage everybody to follow you. We're sending out an email after this with links to all the resources, and I hope that you'll utilize them well. Thank you all. God bless.
Thank you.